Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we'll be going through Russell Moore's leaked letter to Religion News Service. And I'm not saying that Russell Moore leaked it, but somebody did. And the thing about Religion News Services is they are an obviously apostate news agency. They are not a Christian organization. They don't cater to Christians whatsoever, and Christians don't read them. It's kind of like saying Christians read the Washington Post. They don't do that. So, whoever leaked this to Religion News Service is not a Christian. They're not an ally in the fight for, specifically here, the Southern Baptist Convention. But they're not a good person they're not on your side when it comes to evangelicalism in general. So, if you see someone leak anything to Religion News Service, Christianity Today, Washington Post or Houston Chronicle, New York Times, those types of outlets, Christians don't read those. So the only reason you would go to those outlets is to bash the church to a pagan audience, and that's not becoming of a Christian. So with that said, Russell Moore wrote a letter back in 2020 to the trustees of the ERLC. Basically, just part of it is patting himself on the back. This is a 4,000 word letter. It's very long. I think it's pretty self-indulgent because he's trying to prove himself on many areas, such as race, such as sexual abuse, that he thinks that he's rattling the cages in trying to address the issue, but he's not doing anything substantial to address that problem. And you see him brag about there's the Caring Well conference, which a Big Eva conference doesn't affect the average churchgoer. So the idea that he feels like he's doing so much and that he's rattling the cages is not true. And you'll see later on that he says that he's being psychologically and institutionally terrorized, or him and his family are. And that's, well, who cares? But again, this is a very self-indulgent letter. So, one thing is he's bragging about how he brought in Rachel Denhollander to discuss sexual abuse in the church. And, you don't bring in the goats to help fix the church. You don't do that. That's not what you do. Rachel Denhollander is the one who blamed, was it that massage parlor shooting in Atlanta, Georgia, I think. She was the one that was blaming the complementarianism for that. And, that's just ridiculous. But that's who Rachel Denhollander is. So I don't trust her. And I don't think you should either. But Russell Moore obviously does. And that's another reason not to trust her. Because Russell Moore is a bad dude. This is a theological liberal through and through. And he does not like being called into account, because as far as discernment goes, he's been one of the biggest targets. Certainly the biggest target in the Southern Baptist Convention has been Russell Moore by far, and it's not even close. Even if Kevin Ezel, who I've been focusing on a lot lately, is far worse, Al Mohler, I would also say, is worse. But Russell Moore is the most obvious because he's super liberal, and it shows. So there's not a whole lot of substance in this first part. So until this part where he lays a little bombshell here. I say bombshell, but it's slander. And I'll explain why I say it's slander. The last time they did this, I was investigated by a president of their body who was at that moment using his pastoral authority to sexually sin. The task force, we were told at the time, is just finding a way to answer questions. The headlines then were Russell Moore and ERLC under investigation for hundreds of churches leaving and defunding the convention. Their own report showed that the claim was false, but there was no similar trumpeting of those findings. That's because that's the point, to keep a cloud over me, to keep me self-censoring about and silent about these matters. And, so he's trying to defend himself, saying that churches aren't defunding the cooperative program because of me. And I'm pretty sure that that's not the case. We've seen a drastic a decrease in giving. So there is a decrease in giving that can be tied to the ERLC. And it can probably also be tied to the corruption at the North American Mission Board and the wokeness being taught at the seminary. So there's a lot of reasons to defund the cooperative program. And the ERLC is, again, the most obvious among them. So he's accusing a pastor of sexually sinning. And he doesn't name that pastor. So, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Well, in this case, he's not even naming names. So you'll see that a lot in this letter. He does not name names. So claims made without evidence should be dismissed likewise. So he's accusing someone of sexually sinning, and he doesn't name their name. He doesn't say what they did. So I don't really care about that line because he didn't substantiate his own claim there, and that's not my fault. Now we're shifting into race. So now he's talking about racial reconciliation, which is just a buzzword for enacting woke policies, typically at a government civil authority level, but also can be at a church ecclesiastical level as well. My family and I face constant threats from white nationalists and white supremacists. He does not name names, including within our convention, also no names. Some of them have been involved in neo-Confederate activities going back for years, no names. Some are involved with groups funded by white nationalist nativist organizations, being very redundant there. Some of them have just expressed raw racist sentiments behind closed doors, like what? They want to deflect the issue to arcane discussions that people do not understand. That is pretty important here, such as critical race theory. He just said that you don't understand critical race theory, that Southern Baptists the context of this would be he's saying that Southern Baptists don't understand critical race theory. And he's trying to gatekeep on knowledge. Critical race theory is not hard to understand. If you know what Marxism is, there's the proletariats and the bourgeoisie or whatever it's called. So you have those two groups. You have the rich and the poor, to put it in even more layman terms. That's classical Marxism, where it takes that specific power dynamic. Cultural Marxism takes that dynamic to a whole new level. And cultural Marxism is critical theory. That's what critical theory is. It's cultural Marxism. And critical race theory is when you take that same dynamic from classical Marxism on class and you apply it to race. So whites are the oppressors and blacks are the victims. That's critical race theory. And the application of critical race theory has many different forms, and that's been the primary issue within the Southern Baptist Convention currently. It's not hard to understand. If you know what Marxism is, you can understand critical race theory. It's not difficult. So, this is pretty interesting. From the very beginning, I have been attacked with the most vicious guerrilla tactics on such matters. I've been told to keep quiet about this by others. And I don't know what guerrilla tactics mean. Is he talking about the discernment bloggers? Is that who he's talking about? Either way, I don't care. This same leader told a gathering that the conservative resurgence is like the Civil War, except this time, unlike the last one, the right side won. Again, no substantiation. This is the first time where we actually see, not the first time where we see name drops, but another major claim here. This is a claim that people were running with. Another SBC leader used constant pressure against me in protest of our hiring of Dan Darling and Trililia Newbell. Those two L's are throwing me off. In 2013. At the time, this was, he said, because they did not have adequate Southern Baptist backgrounds. When I answered his concerns to his face, he said, I was just really concerned about that black girl, whether she's an egalitarian. When I asked what could possibly lead him to thinking that a woman who has written complementarian articles for complementarian websites was an egalitarian, he responded, a lot of those black girls are. That same leader also let me have it when I said that white Christians should join our black brothers and sisters in lamenting when young black men are shot. And he goes on to list Ferguson, Missouri, which was a justifiable shooting. Eric Gardner, little grayer area, but you can't charge one cop for that incident. And then I think that was the Dylan Roof shooting that he refers to last. So let's talk about that name. I specifically looked up Trililia Newbell. And if you look at her Twitter, like, she's buddies with Beth Moore. I have deep love and respect for Beth Moore. She let me know this was coming. So, Beth Moore gave Newbell the scoop that she was leaving the Southern Baptist Convention. So it's safe to assume that they're buddy. And obviously this is years later. So, this incident was in 2013 with people who are not named. So again, we can dismiss these claims because this is basically hearsay. This isn't actually a substantive claim. But yeah, I would say that this person's an egalitarian just by looking at their Twitter account. Like, I wouldn't hire them. And that, if you look at her website, she's clearly woke. Like, that much is pretty obvious. This person's clearly on board with critical race theory. But egalitarian, probably a little bit harder to prove. But if you're buddy with Beth Moore, yeah, that's a reasonable concern. Now, maybe this Southern Baptist leader said it, and, he had a very legitimate concern. Maybe he worded it poorly. I kind of mockingly joked about what he is accused of saying. Maybe he did say it, but the substance of the matter is he thinks she was an egalitarian, and there's very credible reason to conclude that she's an egalitarian. So what does it matter? The style of what he said and how he said it, it's bad, but it's secondary to the actual claim that she's an egalitarian, and writing for complementarian websites is not evidence that you are a complementarian. Again, I think Russell Moore will come out of the closet on being an egalitarian. We'll see that shortly, I think. So that was one of the bigger instances in this. So that's what a lot of people are running with. And again, unsubstantiated claim. My concern about such issues is not because I believe in social justice, although the literal meaning of those words, of course I do, as the major and minor prophets tell us. No, the major and minor prophets do not advocate social justice. Social justice has and always will be a specific political term. It is not a brand of justice. It is an ideology. I believe in standing against racism, not just because I love our African American and Hispanic and Asian American and immigrant, dude, use commas, brothers and sisters in Christ, although I certainly do, but also because I love the bigots. And I believe unrepentant sin, not brought to the light of Christ and cleansed by the blood of Christ through the gospel, leads to hell. And I really believe in hell, and that's why I've been clear for 25 years on abortion, on sexual chastity and morality, and on racism. No, he's not been very clear on abortion. ERLC is pretty bad pro-life organization, if you ask me. Especially when they have BuzzFeed Joe Carter. Here is another claim of something that was said during the middle of a 2017 debacle. We know we can't take you down. All our wives and kids are with you. This is psychological warfare to make you think twice before you do or say something. That's exactly what it is, according to Russell Moore. And again, what a mangina. Russell Moore's a mangina. I think that's pretty clear. And I don't believe this quote happened for a second, because whose wives and kids are with Russell Moore? Like, this is where the husband should be the head of the spiritual head of the household. If you want to take on Russell Moore like I do, take him on. Take him down. Don't think obviously you shouldn't completely disregard what your wives or kids are saying, but if, take Neil Shenby, for instance, who is notorious for going to J.D. Greer's church, the Summit Church, and he wants to be Neil Shenby is kind of like the controlled opposition for opposing critical race theory. So he's like the voice that's allowed to oppose critical race theory within the church the loudest. And the thing is, the thing that undermines his credibility in that is he goes to J.D. Greer's church, and J.D. Greer is incredibly woke. So, if Neil Shenby wants to boost his credibility on this issue, he should leave that church, regardless of what his wife or daughters or kids will say, because he's the spiritual head of the household. And it's his job to safeguard the spiritual welfare of his family. That is a husband's, father's role. That is his job. So I don't believe this quote happened. And if it did, that would denote cowardice on the opponent's part. But again, I have no problem with making Russell Moore uncomfortable. Smoke wolves out of the church. False teachers like Russell Moore should be uncomfortable in the church. Drive them out. If we want to compare anecdotal reports, I can tell you that I have worked as hard as I possibly can over the last 7 years. I believe this is his tenure as ERLC president. People into staying into the Southern Baptist Convention. One journalist said to me, how many times are you going to try to bail these people out? So again, he has a lot of friends that are journalists. I'm sure this person works for a highly pagan outlet. So, again, this is Russell Moore patting himself on the back, believing he's done such a good job, such a good service. And I believe he's basically trying to keep his job to some degree. Like, there might be, like, the heat may have been turned on so high that Russell Moore was looking for an exit strategy, and the apostate Christianity Today gave it to him. We do not want Dr. Moore to resign. They are telling the truth. They do not want me to leave. They want me to live in psychological terror so that I will not stay in the Southern Baptist Convention, or I will not say what the Southern Baptist Convention has assigned me to say, with much less to reveal what I know about the things going on behind the scenes. Really, what things going on behind the scenes has he ever stuck up? Has he ever talked about? Has he talked about the corruption in the North American Mission Board? No. In fact, he's on board with Kevin Ezell lying to the Supreme Court, arguing that state-level conventions are a national convention entity. And that is a lie. There's a reason why that, I'm pretty sure, was rejected by the circuit in federal courts, because it's a lie. And Russell Moore is complicit in that lie. That's the type of corruption that goes on behind closed doors, and Russell Moore is a party to it. Oh, this line I love. Everywhere I go. I'm surrounded by former Southern Baptists. Last year, speaking at an Anglican church in North American National Meeting. So, this is theologically more liberal than the Southern Baptist Convention by far, and it's not even close. I went back to my hotel room and shook with tears. What a mangina. That's because, as in virtually every one of such meetings, I was greeted by person after person who, like me, grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, went to all the youth camps, knows the difference between Lottie Moon and Annie Armstrong. I actually don't know, and I grew up in a Southern Baptist Church. I mean, I know both those names, but I think Lottie Moon went to China, and Annie Armstrong, I don't know. But between RA and an Actine, I've had more conversations on training Eugen and centrifuge. I think I know what that is. There than I ever had at an SBC meeting. They were nostalgic and wanted me to remember a denomination they loved. None of these people, before they left, called the executive committee and threatened to defund anything if they didn't get their way. The thousands of young people I encounter on college campuses who are now non-denominational don't do exit interviews with their regional associational director of missions. They don't even know what that is. Instead, they just look at the rage and the bigotry and the cover-ups and the buffoonery, and they shrug their shoulders and say, I guess they don't want people like me. Is he talking to homosexuals? Is he talking to egalitarians? People that don't actually adhere to Baptist doctrine? Because that's what it sounds like. In every one of those situations, I want to scream, but that's not who the Southern Baptists are. The people in the churches everywhere I have seen are the kind of loving and mission focused. This guy does not use commas. What is wrong with him? Stop saying and use commas. They are not part of all that you see. And indeed, I think I'm right. And again, this is him trying to pat himself on the back. He's basically trying to say, yeah, it's basically like the Never Trumpers that are like, there was a Republican Party that you used to know and respect. And that was never the case. Like, let's not pretend that there was a good old days of the Republican Party. Maybe it was the 1980s, but in my lifetime, that has never been the case. That the Republican Party has was better in the past than it is now. The Republican Party is actually better than it is now, and that's because of how bad they used to be. So, and the Southern Baptist Convention, I can't necessarily say the same thing, but I think if you're leaving the Southern Baptist Convention and going to like certain mainline denominations, you probably weren't Baptist in the first place. And it's not our job to change our doctrine to appeal to people like that. Oh, more screams. And his family's screaming now. My children asked my wife the other day if their dad had had a moral failing, and they heard from their friends that their dad was under investigation, as anyone would, and they wondered if this meant I had a character flaw. Maybe that happened. Like, that might be again, he actually put names on that, like his family. I guess Maria's his wife. He put a name on that claim. It's not like Russell Moore is incapable of naming names. He names his own wife. He names Rachel Dunhollander. He names Trillia Newbell. He names names. He just refuses to name names because then he has to provide evidence.
Well, no, we ain't fine. But I always say the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence.
What?
Simply because you don't have evidence that something does exist does not mean that you have evidence that something doesn't exist.
What?
What country you from?
What?
What ain't no country I ever heard of. They speak English in what?
And in the famous words of Samuel L. Jackson, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. And that's basically his fallback. You must believe me because the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. And no, I don't have to believe you because you didn't even substantiate enough of your claim. You didn't name the name. You didn't say when. Or maybe you loosely said when, but you didn't say when, where. You're just barely more credible than Christine Blasey Ford. As I shared with the officers, when these people started their guerrilla attacks, who are these people? Are these the discernment bloggers? I spent years in grief, feeling like an exile and like an orphan. Again, no Oxford comma. I felt rejected by my own people and wondered why people would let this go on. And then he has a poem. I am not ashamed. The sort of psychological and institutional terrorism that my wife and children and team and I, use commas. Stop saying and use commas and including and especially the Oxford comma. Because I'm not Southern Baptist enough, but because I am too Southern Baptist. No, you are not. I really believe that they taught me to sing Jesus loves me, the little children, all the children of the world, and I still do. So now more self-indulgence. I've tried to do what I thought was right. There's nothing other than this letter for you to hear from me that what has happened. So just entirely self-indulgent. again, Russell Moore is a wolf, very obvious wolf. That's why he doesn't name names. That's why his letter ends up in Religion News Service. And that's why he was such a terrible leader at the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. If you want to talk about someone that's profit motivated, like false teachers tend to be, that's what the Bible tells us, I believe in 2 Peter, and qualifications for being a biblical elder. False teachers are profit motive, and Russell Moore has bilked the Southern Baptist Convention for perhaps millions of dollars. I don't know what his salary amounts to over the course of several years, but this guy has made a ton of money by Southern Baptists doing nothing. He has accomplished nothing as leader of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. He has operated a glorified blog, and a trash blog at that. So, like I said, Russell Moore, obvious wolf. That's why his letter's in this news outlet. That's why. And the purpose of this letter leaking right now, this is supposed to be an October surprise for Southern Baptists going into the Southern Baptist Convention. And that's what this is. This is supposed to be the October surprise, except this is about as credible as Donald Trump having hookers pee on him. The pee tapes back in the day. That is how credible any of the substantial claims in this, not the substantive. There are no substantive. But as far as like the ones that you kind of care about, like the people that are telling him that they're going to run him out, I'm really concerned about that black girl. Like, no, that probably didn't happen. And there's no reason to think that happened. And then he accuses someone of being sexual sin, using their pastoral authority to sexually sin. And he does not name names. This is a guy who is a wolf. And, there's a reason why he has been the number one target of discernment blogs. There's a reason why. Because he is a wolf. So, my name's Ray. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. If you like this kind of content, also subscribe to the channel and subscribe to evangelicaldarkweb.org. Linked in the description below. Have a blessed day. Let me know what you think about what I think, and I will catch you on the next one.